Dolly may have made surrealism famous, but Carrington made it real and eventually paid for it. Let's talk about Lenora Carrington. She was 20 when she met Ernst in a 1936 London show. She walked away from a very wealthy family who was grooming her to essentially be a debutante, and then ran off with Ernst to the south of France. Their relationship completely collapsed in World War II. Ernst was German-born. He was interned in France as an enemy alien. Carrington fled alone to Spain and had an absolute mental breakdown. Her family committed her to a psychiatric ward. There's real writings from her about this time where she details the abuse that she had to undergo. She eventually escapes, and then she settles permanently in Mexico City. She is one of the most celebrated women of the Surrealist period. Carrington's paintings were dense with her own personal philosophy. She has a lot of fantastical pieces within her work: alchemy, folklore, this idea of metamorphosis, and this underpinning of not caring about a man's approval that made it deeply feminine, but also was very contrasting to the predominantly male Surrealist movement. During the Surrealist movement and a lot of art movements, women were mostly treated as muses, something to be inspired by, something to be the subject of the painting themselves. Whereas Carrington took herself out of that and painted her consciousness in terms of how she was changing. She outlived most of the Surrealists of the movement, being relevant and continuing to paint for almost 60 years. So while Carrington paid the price for being a woman in the Surrealist movement and barely made it out alive, the next artist I'm going to talk about paid an entirely different price. He proved that Surrealism wasn't just for European men, even though the movement's own leader maybe didn't agree with him. Enter the stage Wilfredo Lam. He was born in Cuba in 1902, and he was the son of a Chinese immigrant dad and Afro-Cuban mom. He trained in Madrid and Paris alongside Picasso, who later introduced him to the Paris avant-garde. When the Nazis invaded France in the 1940s, Lam had to escape south and actually left with Breton himself. The return to Cuba absolutely changed everything about his work. He reconnected with his heritage that was specifically Spanish Catholic, but had strong West African influences from Yoruba. Lam took this influence of being back in his native homeland and mixed it with things that he had learned about surrealism in Europe. This resulted in one of his most famous paintings that's called The Jungle, painted in 1943, which is dense with hybrid human-animal figure rooted in Afro-Caribbean spirituality and not European dream logic. Breton did champion Lam's work, ultimately helping him get shows in New York. Lam is proof that surrealism wasn't just white European work. He was authentically Afro-Cuban and was taking these mythologies and deep learned cultural instincts and applying them to the psychiatric philosophy of digging through your subconscious. What looked like the subconscious of a European person would very much be different to someone who was non-European like Lam. Lam wasn't borrowing from an unknown source. He was using his own heritage and applying it to the movement. These artists took stolen thoughts and made them into reality. Next episode, I'm going to review the techniques that they also brought us.